Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to the finale of my Kong reviews. There's gonna be no dicking and farting around when it comes to this episode because I'm gonna try to keep this one sort of short and sweet. Today, I will be reviewing both the Peter Jackson 2005 remake of King Kong. Yes, it's the only steelbook that I own in my entire collection. And of course, the masterful, the amazing, the just fucking fantabulously spectacular Kong Skull Island from 2017 in one video. Yes, I'm doing it this way for a couple of reasons. One, I have so many good things to say about both of these movies, I figured I may as well get them both done in one shot. And also because I have pretty much the same pros for each movie, with the exception of Kong Skull Island having one pro over Kong 05. And also because I have only one con for King Kong 05, but it is a very, admittedly it's a big one, but it's also a minor one. And also due to the fact that I give both of these movies the same rating. I will reveal that at the end of this video, so hold your horses. So, let's begin, shall we? So, my history with King Kong 05 and Kong Skull Island is both very simple. King Kong 05 was the first Kong film I ever saw. I know I said that about 1976 being the first I saw, but technically it was King Kong 05. I do remember seeing King Kong 05 in theaters opening day, and it was absolutely glorious. It was probably the only time in my life where for about a fraction of a second I liked King Kong more than Godzilla. Like I said, it lasted only a fraction of a second, but that does not diminish King Kong 05's value for me. And my history with Kong Skull Island really is almost nothing. I hate to say it, but being a Godzilla 2014 fan, when I heard that Legendary Pictures is planning on making their own cinematic universe with Godzilla and Kong, aka the Monsterverse, and knowing that the second film was going to be a Kong movie, of course I was interested in seeing it. So I went to see it with my friend Emery in theaters opening weekend. It wasn't opening day, unfortunately. I think it was like March 12th when I got around to seeing it. And let me tell you, I was fucking blown away by Kong Skull Island. I was absolutely blown away. It's the first time in my life where I can legitimately say I like a King Kong movie more than a Godzilla movie. Even more so for King Kong 05. I had seen Godzilla Final Wars at the time when I saw King Kong 05. Or actually, no, I didn't. I'd seen Godzilla 2000 at the time for the when I saw King Kong 05, and I still prefer Godzilla, but King Kong 05 came so close to overpassing Godzilla 2000. But with Kong Skull Island, I can legitimately say it's better than Godzilla 2014. I almost kind of hate to say that, but that seems to be a general consensus. So with all that said, well, before I get... Let me share this link with people. I probably should have done that earlier, but whatever. So, give me just 1 second. Regarding Kong 05, I will admit I'm not going to do a plot synopsis for the film. For two reasons. One, many people have seen the film, and many people know pretty much that the film is a shot-for-shot copy of the original 1933 film. That's also the second reason that I'm not going to do a plot synopsis, is because the plot is ultimately almost exactly, actually no, pretty much is exactly the same as the original 33 film. But the difference is, well, there's two differences as far as I'm concerned. One, I think King Kong 05 is better. But two, most importantly, the film is directed by Peter Jackson, as I stated that previously. After many unsuccessful attempts in the late 80s and throughout the 90s to remake King Kong as a more of a different take, different take on the story. Peter Jackson's initial plans to remake it in 1996, I believe, were canned by Universal after the critical failure of Godzilla in 1998, and also the financial failure of Mighty Joe Young 1998. Peter Jackson, upon his success with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, was given the go-to to remake King Kong 05, and we got that in 2005. Of course, I just said that. Despite having pretty much the same plot, King Kong 05 greatly expands upon many aspects of the original 33 film. It's longer. The original King Kong is an hour and 40 minutes long. King Kong 05 is, let's see, 187 minutes long. So it's 3 hours and 18 minutes in its extended version. At least I think that's what it is. By the way, you can get both the extended and theatrical versions on this steelbook. So yeah, it's much longer than the original. Peter Jackson likes long movies to begin with. Not that I blame him, I do too, if they're done right. So the 05 expands upon the original very, very, very much so. There's a lot more screen time for the characters. There's a lot more time in New York. There's a lot more time on the boat to get to Skull Island. There's a lot more time on Skull Island. And there's a lot more time for Kong's rampage once he escapes through New York City. There's a shit ton of expanding here. And I absolutely love it. It's more violent, definitely. Even though Kong 05 is still PG-13, it's much more violent than the original. You actually see people die pretty horrible deaths. It's a lot grittier than the first film. It's a lot more action-packed. It's a lot almost scary at some moments. Overall, just King Kong 05, in my opinion, is... Granted, yes, it is a shot-for-shot copy. But it is because it's expanded upon and actually made into something new, despite it being so similar to the original. I will so strongly praise King Kong 05 as one of the absolute greatest remakes ever made. And if you can't tell already, I do think that this film is leaps and bounds better than King Kong 05. I'm not saying that to be an asshole, and I'm not saying that because I dislike the original. I don't. Though part of it is because of nostalgia, because I did see this film first. Like I said, I saw this when it came out, and I saw King Kong 33 when I was 15 or 16 years old. This movie has 11 years on it. But I legitimately do believe. Granted, yes, I would have liked to see the original script, because the original script for this film was much, much, much different. I would be almost willing to bet that had the original script been adapted to film, we would have had our first R-rated King Kong film. I'd be willing to go that far. And yes, I would like to see that. That could have been like a prototypical R-rated Jurassic Park film, and I would have loved to see that. But this is the closest thing to an R-rated King Kong film that we will get. And yes, despite the original script being much more ambitious, it would have been an awesome film. I think in every single way, King Kong 05 is superior to 1933 in every single way. It's the 1990 Tom Savini Night of the Living Dead in terms of kaiju film remakes. Every single way, it's better than the original. And as for Kong Skull Island, I will be doing a plot synopsis, even though I kind of thought against it, but I decided, yeah, I'll do a very, very brief plot synopsis. So, in 1944, moving on to Kong Skull Island, I got the pros and cons for both films in just a few. In 1944, two fighter pilots, one of them being an American, one being Japanese, Hank Marlowe and Gunpei Ikari, parachute onto an island in the South Pacific and engage in close combat. But the fight is interrupted by a giant ape who, brings his hands up and smashes him over a cliff and separates the two. 29 years later, in 1973, at the very tail end of the Vietnam War, that shit stain of a time, government agent Bill Rhonda, played by John Goodman, from fresh off his performance in 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I may get around to reviewing the Cloverfield film sometime. Bill Rhonda hires British Special Air Service Captain James Conrad, played by Tom Hiddleston, Loki from the MCU, which I couldn't figure out who that guy was until I had my friend Emery say, that's Loki, because I couldn't recognize him without the long flowing black hair and the green armor and the long horns, because he has blonde hair in this film. So they hire James Conrad, who is a skilled tracker, to guide an expedition to a recently discovered island known as Skull Island. The military escort is led by Lieutenant Colonel Preston Packard, played by the gloriously over-the-top Samuel Jackson. And the group is joined by pacifist photojournalist Mason Weaver, who believes the expedition is a secret military operation, which it kind of is. And upon arrival at Skull Island, Packard's men begin dropping seismic charges developed by Houston Brooks, who is a seismologist, to map out the island. However, the military unit is attacked by the same giant ape from 1944, Kong, who kills a number of military personnel rather brutally, and scatters the survivors across the island. Packard regroups with some of his men, including door gunner Relis, pilot Glenn Mills, or Relay, I don't know how you pronounce that, Landsat employee Steve Woodward, and Rhonda. Packard confronts Rhonda, and he reveals his affiliation to be part of the secret government organization Monarch, a reference to... Actually, no, that in just a second. And is using this expedition to prove the existence of monsters and determine their threat to humanity. This being a reference to a ship attack in World War II, where a ship was torn to pieces in the Pacific Ocean, which is a reference to Godzilla 2014, as Kong Skull Island is a prequel to Godzilla 2014, obviously taking place in the 70s. By the way, I apologize if the color on the stream keeps flickering. I think it's my shirt, but oh well, it's not as bad as my tie-dye, but... where was I? Oh yeah, so Packard's group begins to look for Chapman, whose helicopter had crash-landed elsewhere, while the other set of survivors, being Conrad, Weaver, Brooks, biologist San Lin, soldier Rex Slivko, and Landsat employee Victor Neves. Jack is here. Hello, Jack. As they try to get to a rendezvous point to meet a resupply team arriving on the island in 3 days' time, as all the survivors have various encounters with the creatures inhabiting the island. Conrad's group encounter the local Iwi natives, as they are known as well as an older Marlowe, played by the gloriously awesome John C. Reilly. This movie has a fantastic cast. Well, both films do, but this movie in particular. He reveals that, again, the name of this giant ape is Kong, the island's guardian, and he is worshipped as a god by the natives for protecting him from many of the island's nastier inhabitants, the worst being reptilian underground monsters Marlowe dubs skull crawlers. I was saying that to scare you. Sounds stupid now that I say it out loud. Just forget about it. Oh, John C. Reilly is so fucking funny in this movie. So he informs them that Kong attacked and destroyed the military unit because the seismic charges brought the skull crawlers to the surface, and the skull crawlers are responsible for killing Kong's parents, leaving him the last of his kind. However, this is a teenage Kong, so to speak, being only 31 meters in height, so he still is a giant monster, but he's not fully grown. Now, I'd be willing to bet that he's going to be roughly about 225 meters fully grown. Big Jack's Film says, there is a Easter egg on Riley's jacket saying, good for your health, which may possibly be a reference to Akira, but it's actually a reference to his character Dr. Steve Broll from Tim and Eric. Speaking of anime, apparently Neon Genesis Evangelion had a huge influence on this film as well as many other films, including Princess Mononoke from Hayao Miyazaki's Studio Ghibli film, Princess Mononoke, as well as the most obvious reference, Apocalypse Now and Platoon. This being a very Vietnam-esque film. I mean, that's almost shoved down your throat, but in my opinion, it's actually not a bad thing. Anyway, Marlowe also tells the group that he and Gunpei became friends, but Gunpei was killed by a skullcrawler sometime previous. Chapman is ambushed and eaten by a skullcrawler, while Conrad's group helps Marlowe complete a scrap boat built from parts scavenged from Marlowe and Gunpei's planes that they crash-landed on the island on. And they ride the boat down the river and manage to secure communication with Packard's group, but the boat is attacked by nasty little pterosaur-looking bastards, which kill Neves, the main ship pilot, I guess. It's not exactly clear what he is. At least to me, it's not. And they regroup with Packard, who insists on continuing to search for Chapman, though his true objective is to kill Kong, which he perceives as the threat/enemy for killing his men. So it's kind of a... Oh, what was his name? It's my favorite movie. I can't remember his name. The general from Avatar. Quaritch. General Quaritch from Avatar. He's pretty much that, but played by Samuel Jackson. So, Jack says this movie is basically the plot of Jurassic Park 3, but with King Kong and way better. Hey, I like Jurassic Park 3. But yeah, this movie is better than Jurassic Park 3. So anyway, as Conrad and Weaver... Wait a minute, no. Marlowe leads the two groups past a mass grave littered with the bones of Kong's family, and there a skullcrawler attacks the group, killing Rhonda, unfortunately. Why does John Goodman's character have to die? At least Packard isn't Colonel Nevitt from King Kong Lives. Yes, he's more personable than Nevitt from King Kong Lives. That's for damn sure. But anyway, but the skullcrawler also kills many soldiers before dying in a flammable gas explosion that Weaver triggers. And learning about Chapman's death, when the skullcrawler vomits up in a rather nasty ass scene, he vomits up Chapman's skull with his dog tags attached to it, which doesn't quite make sense, but whatever. Packard blames Kong for the deaths of his men and becomes even more determined to kill Kong. The two groups part ways, with Packard's group laying a trap for Kong, while the non-military personnel try to head back to the boat. However, while scouting ahead, Conrad and Weaver encounter Kong up close, which does kind of call to mind the scene in the first Jurassic Park when Sam Neill's character and the two kids encounter the Brachiosaur. And when they see his true benevolent nature, Conrad and Weaver resolve to save him. And as they encounter Kong, Packard's group uses the remaining seismic charges to lure Kong in, and Kong charges toward a small lake, where they incapacitate him with ignited napalm in the lake, though Woodward is killed. let's see, wait a minute, who is Woodward? Anyway, Conrad, Weaver, and Marlowe arrive and persuade the other soldiers to spare Kong, but Packard, being the stubborn asshole that he is, refuses to stand down. However, a massive skull crawler emerges from this lake, referred to by John C. Reilly's character as the Big One. Apparently it is either the leader or just the alpha member of the skull crawlers. Yes, exactly. Here's to the Big One. And then Packard is proceeded to be crushed to death by a recovering Kong. The Skullcrawler overpowers Kong and chases after the remaining survivors. Cole is killed in a failed suicide bomb attempt to kill the Skullcrawler, which is probably the only weak scene in the film, because Cole had a grenade launcher. It was the same grenade launcher Arnold Schwarzenegger used when he played the Terminator in Terminator 2. I can't quite remember it, but he had like 8 or 9 grenades still with him, which he easily could have maybe not killed the Skullcrawler, but he could have at least seriously injured it using this grenade launcher. But no, he decided to suicide bomb himself, but it fails because the Skullcrawler smacks him out and smashes him into a cliff with its tail. But Kong returns to battle the Skullcrawler and rescue the survivors. He is also aided by the survivors when the boat shows up, and turns out that this ragtag boat still has some firepower on it. Weaver is knocked into a marsh during the fight, but Kong saves her from drowning. And during the fight, which is a fantastic fight, the Skullcrawler tries to kill Kong and eat Weaver, but Kong kills it by ripping out its innards while his hand is inside the Skullcrawler's mouth with its tongue wrapped around his arm. But he rips his arm out, and along with the tongue, rips out its innards. A rather gory death, which kind of does also bring to mind Godzilla's kiss of death toward the female Muto. And allows the survivors to leave the island once killing the Big One. And during the credits, Marlowe is shown returning home, reuniting his wife, and meeting his son, his grown-up son, for the first time, and watching a Chicago Cubs game on TV, which is it's a callback to a joke that John C. Reilly did earlier in the film, which I'll get to in a minute. And in a post-credit scene, Conrad and Weaver are detained by Monarch, and they're informed that Skull Island is just the beginning, and that Kong is not the only monster to roam on the world. And as proof, they are shown archive footage of cave paintings depicting Godzilla, Rodan. See, Hollow Earth theory, possibly a connection to Pacific Rim. I don't think so. I don't think they're trying to make a possible connection between the Monsterverse and Pacific Rim. Though, if they are, it's subtle, I'll give it that. And I actually do think that would be both kind of cool, but also slightly unnecessary. I'm not opposed to a Godzilla or Kong crossover with Pacific Rim, but I can't deny that it's really not necessary. That's the best way I can describe it. But anyway, cave paintings depicting Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, and finally, a battle between Godzilla and King Ghidorah. The film finally cuts to black with the sound of Godzilla's roar being heard, thus ending the film. So holy motherfucking shit, is Kong Skull Island fucking amazing. Kong Skull Island is definitely in my top 5 list of favorite monster movies of all time. I almost cannot put into words how much I fucking love this movie. King Kong 05 has nostalgia over this film, but Kong Skull Island has overall favorability in this category. So let's get to the pros of both King Kong 05 and Kong Skull Island. First off, in both films, the characters are great. They are absolutely great. Hang on a second. In Congo 5, we have Adrian Brody playing Jack Driscoll. He is light years better than Bruce Cabot from Kong 33. He's not bland. He's not boring. He's not one-dimensional. He's not, he's just a massive, 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 massive significant improvement over, over Bruce Cabot. He has a personality. He has a couple... He's a smartass, for one thing. He is a total smartass at times. He is also kind of a bitter man because he's trying to make something out of his life in the Hollywood scene where theater is dying off. He prefers theater to film, but he's trying not to let that happen. And his relationship with Ann Darrow is nowhere near as forced as, say, something like Bella and Edward from Twilight, the two BDSM fucktards from 50 Shades of Dogshit, and Anakin and Padme from the prequel Star Wars trilogy. Oh, shit. Their relationship was great. And speaking of which, I think it's Naomi Watts. Yeah, I think so. Naomi Watts as Ann Darrow does a fan-fucking-tastic job as Ann Darrow. She does an absolutely fantastic job. She blows Fay Wray out of the water. Absolutely blows Fay Wray out of the water. It's like comparing It 1990 to It 2017. One is absolute garbage, being It 1990. And one is almost cinematic gold, and that is Naomi Watts as Ann Darrow. She is absolutely phenomenal. I cannot praise Naomi Watts' performance as Ann Darrow in this movie. It's actually one of very, very, very few things that Kong 05 has over Kong Skull Island. Is that the female lead in Kong 05 is better than Kong Skull Island. And Jack Black as Carl Denham is so goddamn glorious. This was the first film that I ever saw Jack Black in, and upon seeing other films later in my life, seeing Jack Black, I always referred to him as, hey, that's the guy from King Kong 05. Jack Black is so goddamn good as Carl Denham. He's not... I'll admit, Robert Armstrong was slightly... I think he's slightly hammy, especially in the original King Kong. He has a slightly hammy performance. It's not bad, though. It leads to him being charismatic, but Jack Black completely ditches the hamminess. He's a total smartass. He's a bit of a scheming, conniving little shit, but he's just a really passionate filmmaker who wants to get movies done his way, the way he wants to do it. That's the same thing, but you know what I mean. And the rest of the supporting cast, they all just do a phenomenal job. Admittedly, some of them are just there to be cannon fodder for the monsters in Kong to kill. But still, everybody gives a phenomenal performance. Everybody does not feel forced, does not feel wooden. Just everybody in the entire cast, as well as the acting. That's the first two pros. Great characters and great acting. Everything is just top notch, absolutely perfect in my opinion. Pro number 3 is that the film's pacing is absolutely phenomenal. Crap. The film, each act, the first act, the second act, and the third act, feel like movies in and of themselves. They have a build-up and a climax. So I feel like you get a triple climax in this movie because it's 3 hours and 18 minutes long. That does make sense. But I really do feel like you get 3 climaxes in each film, in each act in this film. There's great build-up to... there's a great build-up and exploration of New York and the ship leading up to arriving on Skull Island. Then there's all the stuff that happens on Skull Island where we're exploring the island, we're seeing what it looked like nowadays, and we have to use our imaginations to guess what it looked like in its heyday. It's much grittier, it's much darker, it's much creepier. And when Anne is taken by Kong, we see more of the island. We see Kong's domain. We see more of the island's wildlife, which is, again, it's much more gritty. It's much more violent. It's much nastier looking. Like, I would hate to live on Skull Island in Congo 5. I would absolutely hate it. And of course, we have the climax of the second act being Kong's three-way fight with the three V-Rexes of the island. After that, we have the fight with giant bats, and we also see Ann Darrow's relationship with Kong, what's the word? Develop to them becoming much more close and actually growing to love each other throughout this. And when she's rescued by Jack and brought back to New York, we have the third act of the film, which is Kong's rampage throughout New York. And that doesn't really have any build-up, but again, there's a lot more exploration. There's a lot more of Kong's rampage throughout New York. There's a lot more to Anne and Kong's relationship as they grow to bond. One of my absolute favorite scenes in the entire film. Complete favorite scene, probably one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema, is when they return to New York. I think it's not specifically stated it's Christmas time, but it's winter. It's winter in New York. There's snow. It's cold as fuck. After Kong retrieves Anne, Kong doesn't kidnap her like he does in Kong 33. She actually comes to Kong and says, "Hey, I'm here. You can take me." Not in a sexual way, but you know what I mean. They go off together through, I think it's Central Park, and there's a little lake there which is frozen over, and Kong discovers this to be slippery, so he and Anne have some fun when they start slipping and sliding around on the ice, and it's just a really nice scene watching Anne and Kong just have fun together. Isolated from the rest of the world, just enjoying each other's company. It's ruined by the military showing up and destroying the lake. And which, by the way, I forgot to say one more thing regarding the character. Oh, no. Well, okay, it's kind of both, but Kong himself in this movie, like in the original, but again, better here, Kong himself is a character. He's not just a giant monster, which he is. Which, by the way, Kong is much smaller in Congo 5 than in his previous incarnations. In the original, actually no, he's about the same size as he was in the original. In the original, he's confirmed to be 25 feet. In King Kong vs. Godzilla, Kong was 45 meters tall. In King Kong Escapes, Kong is 20 meters tall. In 76 and King Kong Lives, he's 50 feet tall. In this movie, Kong once again is 25 feet tall, just like in the original. And the reason for that is because Peter Jackson wanted this to be more realistic. Well, yes, there is still debate of whether or not Sasquatch, Gigantopithecus, does exist. Here, Kong is just stated to be a giant-sized, basically a giant silverback gorilla. I think he's known as Megaprimatus sapien or something in Latin. He's just a species of gorilla that is naturally this big. And he definitely looks like a gorilla. He's got the beer belly. He walks on all fours. He's got the gorilla face. He looks amazing. And his character is fantastic. You can tell that he's intelligent. Even though he is a savage brute, he also has a soft side. And he has sentience. He's intelligent. And I think it's better in Kong Skull Island, but it's amazing here. It's a little better in Kong Skull Island. But overall, Kong's character in this film is utterly amazing, and is no shortage of thanks to the fact that Kong is played by the master of motion capture, Andy Serkis, famous for playing Gollum and Caesar in Rise of the Planet of the Apes and Dawn of the new reboot Planet of the Apes series. Though I don't know if he will be returning for a possible fourth new Planet of the Apes film. If he does, good for him. But if he doesn't, that's fine. He's got 3 movies under his belt. But Andy Serkis, like I said, is the master of motion capture, and it is absolutely amazing in this film. But I'll get to that when I get to special effects. Actually, speaking of which, the special effects in this film are so fucking amazing. There is a lot of green screen. There is a lot of blue screen. There is a lot of composite shots. The motion capture itself is a special effect. It's not a man in a suit. It's CG. But the CG, the green screen effects, the composite shots look utterly amazing. I am positive that there were actual sets made for this film, like the set for the Venture, the set for the Natives area in on Skull Island, which, by the way, is much more violent than in Kong 33. The Natives actually try to kill these people, which it's kind of implied that they were going to in 1933, but here they actually do. But anyway, the special effects are amazing. The sets are very well made. The green screen is great. The look of Skull Island is freaking amazing. It looks like something that takes place on Earth, but it also looks alien at the same time. And the sets for New York are also very good. The Empire State Building looks great. Overall, the special effects are just absolutely jaw-droppingly amazing. And $350 million was very, very well spent. Actually, no, I think it was like $280 million, but still. Millions and millions and millions of dollars that went into this movie were very well spent. Peter Jackson knows how to make a good King Kong film. The monster action in this movie... Actually, no, I'll save that for last, but the pro number 5 is that this movie has amazing cinematography. There's a lot of really wide open shots of the Venture in the middle of the ocean, for example, or of the dirty, gritty, grungy area of 1933 New York during the Great Depression. A lot of wide, sweeping shots of Skull Island looking just absolutely barren and desolate, despite being in jungle. It looks calm, but you don't know of the hell that's going on underneath the tree canopy. Overall, the cinematography for this movie is absolutely gorgeous. Many, many shots in this film could be framed and made as posters. And the last pro that I have for this movie is the monster action in this film is utterly amazing. It's very animalistic. It's very gritty. It's very violent. It's very brutal. It's very, very just... it feels real. It feels real. The two scenes that come off the top of my head is obviously Kong's fight with the 3 V-Rexes. It looks like a full-on animal fight, like a fight between 2 savage beasts. It's not like a kaiju fight where it is somewhat choreographed. Here it is just full-on savage, brute force, animalistic combat, just mammal combat. And it is brutal, it is fast, it is just absolutely, it's absolutely awesome. And Kong, despite Kong in this film being old, if this Kong was Godzilla-sized, Godzilla would be kind of in trouble. Because this Kong knows how to kick dinosaur ass. And the second scene that I could think of is the spider pit scene that Peter Jackson was able to implement in this film, which was deleted in the original 1933 film, unfortunately. But there... Okay, if you are afraid of bugs, as I am, stay away from this film, because there's many, many, many different types of bugs that just look fucking scary. I am deathly afraid of bugs, I'm not gonna lie. I don't like centipedes. I don't really care for spiders. I am scared shitless of bees. I've been swarmed by wasps and hornets before. It is not fun, believe me. I am scared shitless of bees. Even though they're not in this film, bees are bugs. I am scared of lobsters. I'm kind of scared of scorpions. I am just really afraid of bugs. And the spider pit scene in this movie, with the first time I saw this movie, I had shivers, not running, racing up my spine. It's a fantastic scene. It's a great, great fight scene against the remaining survivors after Kong knocks them off the log bridge into the spider pit. It's a great scene, but damn, did it scare the shit out of me when I first saw it. I actually had to fidget around in my seat so many times to scratch my back when I was in the theater. Oh my god, bugs scare me. So overall, the King Kong 05, it's got so much good things going for it. What's the one con? I know, right? When Lumpy gets slugged, I was like, I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going. Yeah, exactly. I know, right? But the one con that I have for this film is the same as 1976. Why does Kong have to die? You get so attached to Kong in this film. Yeah, he's a savage brute, but they go the 1976 route. Yeah, he's a monster, but he's also lonely. He has a soft side to him. You get attached to him as a character. You like seeing and Kong spend time together. You like seeing them together, and you get attached to Kong. And it breaks your heart to see them gun down Kong. I was crying my fucking eyes out when I saw this movie in theaters. I am not gonna lie. And to this day, I cannot watch Kong die in this movie. Same as the 1976. That's just because it's really uncomfortable to watch. Here, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. Why does Kong have to die? And that's why I prefer the ending to the PS2 King Kong video game, Peter Jackson's King Kong, the movie, the game, which is a terrible title, but the ending to the game is different than the movie. Kong actually defeats all of the biplanes that are sent out to kill him, and he is recaptured and sent back to Skull Island. I would have much rather preferred that. That way, if Peter Jackson wanted to make a sequel, which he teased us with, but I'll get to that in a second. If Peter Jackson wanted to make a sequel, he could have. And based on how successful this film was, if he asked to, he probably would have made at least one. But yes, why does Kong have to die? Why? Why does he have to die? Fuck you, Peter Jackson. So with all that said, let's move on to Kong Skull Island. Once again, there pretty much is the same thing. The characters are great. The pacing is great. The acting is great. The special effects are amazing. The monster action is amazing. The cinematography is great. And the one pro that this film has over Kong 05 is this movie's sense of humor. I'll get to that in a minute, but the characters are all great, in my opinion. Tom Hiddleston does a really good performance as James Conrad. I would not be surprised if some people call him boring, and he slightly is, but he's still charismatic. He's not Bruce Cabot boring. He is the standard, no-nonsense badass who is skilled at what he does. And actually, Hiddleston described his character as a man who holds no political allegiance in a conflict, but understands conflict. He's a former soldier who was formed by an understanding of war, but his specific set of skills is something that's attached to nature. And I think that's something people haven't seen in a long time. And that is very, very, very true. In fact, that is hitting the nail exactly on the head, in my opinion. Absolutely nails it. Samuel Jackson as Colonel Packard, he's really good. I mean, if you want to see more of Samuel Jackson's over-the-topness, watch this movie. He plays a very bitter man, which a lot of military officials toward the end of the Vietnam War did feel, because we did lose the Vietnam War essentially. It was a total shithole. One of my favorite, probably my favorite scene, or not really it is my favorite scene in the film with Packard, is in the beginning of the film when we're first introduced to Packard. He's sitting in his office as he's about to be taken back to the U.S. He's sipping a beer, and he's looking at his box of all the medals that he won over his tour of service. And he just says, I think there's a Purple Heart in there. There's a Medal of Honor, Medal of Bravery, and all that. Various military medals in this box. And he just says, hold this for what? And it's probably my favorite scene of Packard in this film, because he perfectly embodies the type of bitter military official that were rampant around Vietnam time back in the 70s, because that's how a lot of people felt. Why the hell did I put my life on the line to protect my country for us basically to just call it quits? What the fuck was the point of you sending me out there to risk my life in a shithole country at the time, which it was. Vietnam was a shithole country. It's gotten a lot better, yes, but back at the time it was bad. Vietnam was a toilet. A lot of people who were being withdrawn from Vietnam after years and years of fighting, you're just saying, what the fuck was the point of this then? And Samuel Jackson does an absolutely phenomenal job as Packard, in my opinion. He gets he gets kind of hammy throughout the film, but it's typical Samuel Jackson hamminess, and he does a great job. John Goodman as Rhonda, he does a really good job. I mean, John Goodman's a great actor. John Goodman is a really, really good actor. In any movie that he's in, even if it's like a small role, like say for example his performance in Kevin Smith's Red State, he has a minor role in that film, but he plays it very well. He plays a no-nonsense badass in that film who's very conflicted. Here, he plays a no-nonsense government official who's trying desperately to prove the existence of monsters. And he does. But he unfortunately loses his life, which is maybe the only sort of kind of con that I have with this film. But outside of that, John Goodman does a great job. And Brie Larson as Mason Weaver, she does a good job, but her character probably is the weakest in the film. And I'm not saying that as an insult. She just doesn't have that much going for her. She's just kind of a fun-loving. She's not a damsel in distress, which I do like about her. She seems like she kind of can hold her own in a rough spot. And the only reason that she's saved by Kong is because she's knocked into the marsh by the big skullcrawler. However, that could have been avoided had she gotten away from this giant monster fight. But, I mean, it's not as bad as Yuri from GMK, but still. But anyway, she does do a very good job with the character. There's just not that much going for her. Though she certainly does have her moments where she's funny. And the rest of the supporting cast, they all do really good jobs. There's no bad performances, except maybe, or it's not really bad, but Jing Tian as San Lin, who is a biologist working for Monarch. She's the weakest character in the entire film, because she really just does not have that much. She has nothing to do. She's just there to be a secondary female character. And let us not forget the glorious John C. Reilly as Hank Marlowe, who is a U.S. Army Air Forces lieutenant of the 45th Pursuit Squadron, who had been stranded for nearly 29 years on Skull Island since World War II. And he knows the creatures of the island and is a friend of the Iwi natives. John C. Reilly is my favorite character in this fucking film. John C. Reilly is so glorious. He is so fucking... John C. Reilly just might be one of my favorite comedic actors, tied with Will Ferrell. Yes, you're talking to a Step Brothers fan. It's one of my favorite films of all time. Probably my favorite comedy. That movie is just so fucking funny. And I cannot wait to see Step Brothers 2. But anyway, John C. Reilly is just so freaking funny in this movie. He's also kind of a no-nonsense badass, too. I guess before Gunpei was killed by a skullcrawler, he taught him how to use a katana, and he does. Even though he doesn't use it very much, he uses it very well. The first scene that we see him in, this is explaining the Chicago Cubs game. When he sees the survivors from the military unit, he says, "You're more glorious." Or no, "You look better than a hot dog and a beer sitting in front of a Chicago Cubs game." But you're real. I'm sorry. John C. Reilly is so fucking amazing in this movie. But the pacing is also good. There's not really much build up to Skull Island. Admittedly, like the first half hour of the movie doesn't take place on Skull Island, but the rest of the film does, which I actually do kind of like, because one big problem that I have with almost every other King Kong film except King Kong vs. Godzilla, but I kind of just have a problem with that entire film. Even Congo 5 is that the movie does go downhill for me once they get off Skull Island, because I just don't care. Because I know what the third act of the film leads up to, and that's Kong's death. But this movie's pacing is fantastic. It's overall kind of fast, but there's a couple moments where it does slow down and let us take in what just happened in the film. But there's never a dull moment throughout the film. You're never bored, in my opinion. You're never bored watching the film. And of course, the acting overall is really good. I already covered that. The cinematography is also very, very good. This movie was very much, like I said, very much inspired by Apocalypse Now, which is probably the most famous Vietnam War film, except for maybe Platoon, but that's just because that's Charlie Sheen in it. This movie's cinematography is very, very good. It's kind of similar to Congo 5, where there's a lot of really wide open shots showing off Skull Island, which again, like in Congo 5, looks like Earth, but also looks very alien at the same time. The movie's humor is also very, very good. That's pro number 5, is that the humor in this movie is very, very, very funny. It's not like laugh out loud funny like Step Brothers, and this movie is not like full blown action comedy like, say, Army of Darkness, the third Evil Dead film. Well, even though at times this movie's borders on it, but it is overall a kaiju film. I compare the humor in this film to something like Logan, where the movie is overall very serious. Well, this movie's not as serious as Logan, but the humor is just sprinkled in. It's not shoved down your throat. The humor is sprinkled in to lighten the tone every now and again. There's some awkward humor. There's some borderline slapstick humor, and there's just a lot of... There's also a little bit of referential humor, but a lot of the humor here is just clever writing, in my opinion. And it's also John C. Reilly just hamming it the fuck up. But the humor in this movie is very, very good. There was a few moments where I was just laughing out loud, borderline getting stomach cramps. And the last two pros that I have for this movie is that the special effects are freaking amazing. They're pretty much as good. Actually, no, they're better than Congo 5, because this movie is 12 years older than Congo 5. The blue screen shots are better. The green screen shots are better. The CG is better. Kong is once again portrayed by motion capture. Let's see. What's his name? Terry Notary and Toby Kebbell as King Kong. Motion capture performance. A 110-foot tall gorilla who is worshipped as the king and god on Skull Island by the Iwi natives. Kong is amazing in this movie. He's a total badass. This is a giant version of King Kong 05, in my opinion. But better, because he acts more human. Some people may say that's dumb, but I like Kong acting more human. This Kong also does walk bipedal, not quadrupedal, which I prefer. I prefer my King Kong to be bipedal. King Kong 05 is fine because they went for a more realistic approach. That's perfectly fine, but I still do prefer a bipedal King Kong. The effects on the various other monsters throughout the movie. One little slight downside is that there's not that many different types of monsters on this movie, but I kind of figured that's just because this movie's not as long as King Kong 05. Like, if it was, I'm sure there would have been more. This movie is 118 minutes long. It's just... No. Yeah, it's just shy under 2 hours. Which is fine. I don't really mind. The film has a good pace. Anyway, had this movie been like 2.5 hours long, I'm sure the director, Jordan Vogt Roberts, would have expanded upon Skull Island a lot more. But for the creatures that we have in this film, it's fine. And the special effects on the skull crawlers are also very, very good. I don't know if they were portrayed by motion capture as well. Nah, I don't think so. I'm not sure. It doesn't say. But anyway, and the special effects for the skull crawlers are really good too. The skull crawlers are nasty bastards. Nasty. They eat pretty much anything that moves, and anything they can't digest, they vomit up in a very, very nasty display, spewing bile and undigested bones and meat all over the place. It's disgusting. You want to see Kong just rip these little bastards to pieces, which he does. Speaking of which, the last pro that I have here is the monster action in this film is fucking amazing. The initial attack Kong gives upon taking down the choppers provided by the military, it's awesome. It is so awesome to see a giant-sized Kong tear apart helicopters and tear people apart. It is so glorious. And watching Kong take on the skull crawlers, it is also very similar to the fights Kong has in Kong 05 against the V-Rexes. It's very animalistic. It's very brutal. It's very violent and savage. But here, they feel more like kaiju fights because they, for one thing, there's sort of kind of martial arts techniques added into Kong's fighting style. He still is pretty much a self-taught brawler, but you do see him execute a couple martial arts techniques. Like, you see him execute elbow strikes. You see him execute grappling techniques similar to judo or jiu-jitsu. Like, one of them, he flips a skull crawler over his shoulder, which is a classic judo armbar flip. And he also, some of the way he punches, it's very similar to boxing. And also, you do see Kong know how to think on his feet. This Kong is very intelligent, despite him being described as a 14-year-old that's trapped in the life of an adult. Which is, again, hits nail on the head. In one scene when he's fighting the big one, he picks up a tree, and he basically makes it into a baseball bat, and he goes batter up to the big one, breaking there's like a 10-foot thick tree on the skullcrawler's jaws. So this Kong feels like a kaiju. I mean, in a lot of Toho kaiju fights, because a lot of the actors knew, to some extent, hand-to-hand combat, they would sometimes make their monsters' fighting style similar to some real-life martial arts. Like, for example, the suit actor for King Kong and King Kong versus Godzilla, he was a jiu-jitsu specialist. King Kong fought like a jiu-jitsu specialist in that film, which makes sense because he was his suit actor was a jiu-jitsu practitioner. Here, Kong acts more human, so I think it makes more sense that his thinking style is much more human, and his fighting style is much more human, but it still is very animalistic. And overall, is there any cons that I have? No, I wrote pros. Let me rewrite that. Are there any cons that I have with Kong Skull Island? And the answer is no. No, I don't have a single problem with Kong Skull Island whatsoever. I love this movie. This movie is just... I'm going to save that for a minute. So with all that said about King Kong 5 and Kong Skull Island, these two movies, based on a giant ape who is probably Godzilla's biggest rival next to Gamera, these two movies I award a perfect, despite this one having the one problem, that being Kong dying. Kong doesn't die in this film, thank fucking God. I'm going to award these two films a perfect 10 out of 10 each. This one gets the nostalgia factor, like I said earlier, and this one gets the overall favorable review. But I love both of these movies so much, I cannot and will not give them anything other than a perfect 10 out of 10. This one in particular, this might be one of my babies. Kong Skull Island is my favorite King Kong film ever made. One of my favorite kaiju films ever made. And is, in my opinion, the greatest King Kong film ever made, period. And hopefully, as much as I love Kong in this film, hopefully Godzilla wins. But also, hopefully Godzilla vs. Kong is either, or the rest of the MonsterVerse in general, is either as good as Kong Skull Island or better. Better than Kong Skull Island. But hopefully it's at least as good. So that'll do it for all my reviews of all the King Kong films. I gotta wrap this up. My grandparents are going to bed. That'll wrap up my King Kong reviews. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you to the one or two people who decided to stop by. I don't know if Jack stuck around for the entire review. Jack, tell me if you did, please. Real quick, soon, please. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. Look forward to my next reviews as I... Okay, Jack, you did stick around for the whole thing. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Let me know in a little bit what you thought of my reviews. Look forward to my next videos as I finish up my movie collection videos, and as well as I finish up my Hondathon. And after that, I got some plans that I'm going to be revealing to you guys afterwards. And also very soon, since I just noticed this morning, I have 97 subscribers. So look forward to 100 subscriber Q&A sometime in the very near future. But look forward to me finishing up my Hondathon and my movie collection videos. Thank you very much to those who enjoyed these Kong reviews. And I'll go to Skull Island, kill some giant monsters, save Kong from an insane, stupid-ass lieutenant, and look forward to Godzilla vs. Kong. And I will see all of you in the next one.